Well, good morning again. You know, I thought yesterday that I'd talk a little bit more about ETs today, but that's not what's been on my mind. I started to go into the meditation room this morning. In fact, I did walk into it, and Spirit redirected me out to the atrium, so I never even lit candles or any of my normal things that I do in the meditation room on most days. And I went in the atrium and sat under the getting close to full moon. Full moon is tomorrow, at least here. I imagine it's that way in most of the earth, but I'm not exactly sure because perspective is everything. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today, the high cost of our ignorance. As I sat there and went through the people that I pray for every day, by visualizing them, and anyway, that's my process. I started thinking about how much I've learned even this year, but certainly over the past several years, how much I've learned that I had no clue previously. I mean, I just didn't know. And that's what the little blurb that I just wrote a little while ago is the good thing about this awakening is that we are realizing how little we knew. The bad thing is that until now we didn't know what we didn't know. That's ignorance, not knowing that you don't know. It also defines ego, the present point of view. Can you see why forgiveness is so important? I certainly can. I mean, if someone had told me some years ago some of the things that I take for granted now as being true, I would have thought the person was nuts. I mean, truthfully. I mean, some of the things that I'm convinced are so true now and just simply the way it is, I was clueless about in the past. I mean, if you had told me that I would believe such nonsense, which I would have perceived as nonsense at the time, I would have thought you were nuts. Yes, I would. I didn't see myself, for example, 20 years ago, as a slave. I knew that I wasn't able to achieve some of the things in my life that I wanted to achieve. I knew, well, I don't even know that I knew that I was a victim. I mean, it was just simply the way it is. It was life, it's the way it is. I mean, it's even hard to go back and talk about how I was in the past without coloring it by what I know now that I didn't know then. When I was a fundamentalist Christian, if you had told me some of the things that I now believe are givens, I would have thought you were a heretic, a blasphemer, because it wasn't in my frame of reference. And so the high cost of my ignorance was that I didn't know who I was. And because I didn't know who I was, I really didn't know who anybody else was. And because I didn't know who anybody else was and who I was, I had trouble creating relationships that were anything other than superficial. I simply didn't know what I didn't know. And I simply didn't know that I didn't know. And in my ignorance, thinking that I knew and what I knew was right, I was arrogant and alienated myself from a lot of people. Probably my own family, and some of them still haven't haven't accepted me, and that's where they are. It's okay. I'd rather it not be that way, but it is what it is. And it is laughable. I give a little chuckle, but it is laughable how seriously we take ourselves and how much we think that we already know. And we don't. We're clueless. When I think of the Illuminati, and I've gotten lots of comments over the past few days anyway, when I talked about what if the Illuminati told the truth and about forgiveness and Anonymous not forgiving. I talked about all of them. And anyway, one of them I'm going to read from Miska. I have no problem forgiving them if it would mean all the nonsense would stop for good. In all honesty, I don't hold animosity towards them. I actually often have great pity for them. I just hope that very soon we can all get onto the same page. So do I, Miska. So do I. And I think we have a chance of getting on the same page. But when I look at some of the ways that I think I've been victimized in my life, I wonder how much the victimizers actually know of the truth. Do they see themselves as victimizers? I can't believe that most people, if they understood that they were victimizing others, would continue to do it. It's hard for me to comprehend how anyone with knowledge could do some of the things that are being done and that have been done. It's just incomprehensible to me how inhumane humans can be to other humans, not to mention to animals and to the earth itself. It boggles my mind and it baffles my imagination. I just have a hard time seeing how and why. Because I don't know what I don't know. And the more that I am learning by allowing myself to have at least somewhat of an open mind and an open heart toward life, the more that I'm learning, the more I realize that there's probably still tremendous areas that I'm ignorant about. Areas that are affecting my experience right now. I don't know what I don't know, and neither do you. Which is why I think compassion and an attitude of forgiveness is so important. Because we really don't know what the other person knows. We have a tendency, you and I both, have a tendency to project onto others that which we now know. But what if that's not true? What if they really don't know? What if they really can't see what you see and what I see? We think we're awakening. How much haven't we learned yet? How much haven't we remembered yet? I suspect that that which I know is but a fraction of that which is to be known. Just a small fraction. The tip of the iceberg that I call consciousness. It's maybe 10 or 15%, and that's being generous, of what is above the surface. The rest is subconscious, below the level of my knowing, something yet to be learned, which automatically, when you begin to see it that way, automatically makes you humble, wise, compassionate, Just automatic. So getting to the point of knowing that you didn't know what you now do, or think you do, is a tremendous step forward. Now, I admit that when I began to learn how the world worked, when 9/11 happened, and I realized how much the government and the media were lying to us, and then I began, because of the lawsuit, to realize how corrupt the so-called justice system is, how unjust, in fact, it was. When I began to understand how banking worked and how the monetary system worked, I mean, I was enraged. I mean, so angry that these things existed, and I had been clueless about them most of my life. I mean, clueless. I may have felt that something wasn't exactly the way it should be, which made me curious, if nothing else, and allowed me to search and to become educated by searching, by actually studying things and looking at them. But I didn't know. You see, I didn't know until I began to learn. And so spirituality is actually coming up out of ignorance. It is making that which we've not known, the unconscious, conscious. It's what it's all about. It's making the darkness light. Darkness doesn't have an existence of its own. We've said that before. Darkness is merely the absence of light, or not knowing what we don't know. So this journey that we're on of remembering, of educating ourselves into a higher knowledge, cannot help but transform the entire world. And as we pity them, those we consider our victimizers, those we consider the powers that were, as we pity them, recognize that many of them probably don't know what they don't know, which is the basis and the ground for forgiveness. Allow them the same grace that you were given, that you were able to continue on with your life to the best of your ability, even when you were in ignorance, just as I was. It's our ignorance, folks. And it's a high cost. But it's a great benefit to be able to embrace our ignorance, or the fact that we were ignorant yesterday, and that today we know a little bit more than we did then, and we're allowing for the probability that because we are open today, there will be more ignorance revealed tomorrow as knowledge. Ignorance becoming knowledge. Just like demons become angels, our ignorance becomes knowledge when we embrace it and own it. When we own our shadow and our dark side, it becomes filled with light. When we deny and disown it, we remain ignorant. And there's a high cost of that. It's the world that we see mostly around us. But know in your heart that that world is being transformed by the light, by the extraterrestrials, and by the awakening of humanity. Namaste. Have a beautiful day today, and thank you for listening.